I never thought going back to my hometown could be dangerous. I hated that place, sure, but I never imagined I'd leave it convinced that if I'd stayed one more night, I might not have left at all. I went back to my hometown for a short New Year's visit to see my 2 brothers and a few close friends. To be honest, I'd never liked that town. I moved away the moment I had the chance and only returned out of obligation. It was the kind of place you could drive through without realizing it existed. No nearby cities, no neighboring towns for miles. Everything looked outdated, worn down, and forgotten. The people who still lived there were the ones who never left. Normally, I stayed with one of my brothers, but this time both of them were living with their girlfriends. I didn't feel like sleeping on a couch or being in the way, so I decided to stay at the only hotel in town. Calling it a hotel was generous. It sat right off a gravel highway and didn't even have a proper sign, just a building with a flickering light out front. When I pulled in late that night, the parking lot was empty, except for one old pickup truck. Inside, the lobby was dim and quiet, lit by a single lamp behind the counter. An older man stood up when he noticed me. He looked startled, like he hadn't expected anyone to walk in. He was probably in his 60s, with uneven gray hair and a scruffy beard. After a moment, he asked if I needed a room. He handed me a key and led me to a room at the very end of the hallway. The place wasn't falling apart, but it felt unclean in that way old buildings sometimes do. Like no matter how much you clean them, they still feel wrong. The room was small, just a bed, a TV, and not much else. I figured it didn't matter. I only planned to sleep there. I showered quickly, left most of my things packed, and went to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound. Soft knocking, not at my door, farther down the hallway. Slow, spaced-out thuds, followed by silence. Then a few more. It almost sounded like a heavy wooden door opening and closing, the frame catching each time. I listened for a bit, then rolled over and went back to sleep. It wasn't exactly a luxury place, so I didn't think much of it. In the morning, I stopped by the lobby hoping to grab coffee before heading out. The lobby was empty. No coffee, no staff. The desk was unattended. It felt strange, but I shrugged it off and left to meet my brothers. I stayed out most of the day and returned late that night. Once again, the parking lot was empty, except for that same truck. Inside, the lights were mostly off, and the hotel felt colder than before. No sign of the old man. I went to my room, locked the door, changed into comfortable clothes, and then I heard it again. Those dull knocking sounds. This time, they were much closer. Right outside my door. I cracked it open just enough to look into the hallway. I barely had time to notice that the door next to mine was slightly open when I heard a voice call out to me from down the hall. It startled me. It was the old man. He asked me to come down to the lobby. He didn't explain why. Before I could respond, he walked out of view. I didn't like it, but I felt pressured to go see what he wanted. Maybe there was an issue with the room. The hallway was silent as I walked down it. I was pretty sure I was the only guest staying there. When I reached the lobby, it was empty. No old man. No movement. No sound. Standing there alone in the dark made my stomach turn. After a few seconds, I turned around and went straight back to my room. That night, I didn't hear anything else. It was as if the man had vanished. The next day, I mentioned the hotel to my friends. They exchanged looks and told me they'd heard something about that place shutting down a year or two earlier. None of them were sure, but the idea stuck with me. That night, as I drove back, I kept thinking about it. The lights worked. The water worked. Someone gave me a key. It had to be open. When I arrived, the parking lot looked the same as always. One truck. Inside, the hotel was silent. As I reached my room, I stopped. The door was open, just slightly. My heart started racing. I pushed it open further and looked inside. The room was dark. I didn't want to step inside at all, but I saw my suitcase near the bed. I ran in, grabbed it, and left everything else behind. I didn't care about toiletries or clothes. I just wanted out. As I hurried down the hallway toward the lobby, something made me look back. I don't know if I heard something or just felt it. The old man was standing in the doorway of my room, watching me. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove straight to my brother's house and told him everything. He insisted I call the police. When they checked the place, the truth came out. My friends were right. The hotel was closed, not abandoned, but no one was supposed to be there. The owners had left, and the building had been sitting empty. There was no record of anyone working there. No sign of the old man. Even the truck was gone. The police didn't say it, but I could tell they didn't believe me, like they thought I'd imagined it all. I stayed with my brother for the rest of the trip and left town as soon as I could. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that if I hadn't trusted my instincts and left when I did, no one would have ever known what happened to me in that hotel. Story 2. I thought the worst thing about being alone in the mountains was the silence. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing that I wasn't actually alone at all. I took a short trip over Christmas to see my family. The plan was simple: meet at our old cabin in the mountains, a few hours south of the city. It sat almost perfectly between where all of us lived, and we'd been using it for family getaways for as long as I could remember. It was a small wooden cabin with a fireplace, surrounded by trees in every direction. Quiet, isolated, peaceful. That was all I wanted. This wasn't some big holiday gathering, just me, my parents, and my sister. Since I was driving alone, I planned to stay a few extra days. Most of the time would be spent together, but I'd have one full day completely to myself before anyone else arrived. I got there late in the afternoon. The sky was already dimming, and the woods behind the cabin were fading into shadow. I didn't do much that night. Unpacked a little, showered, and went to bed. None of us had been to the cabin in over a year, but from what I could tell, everything seemed normal. The next day was my only full day alone. I woke up early, made coffee, and decided to take a walk through the woods. There was a narrow trail we'd used for years, a rough loop that wound through the trees and eventually led back to the cabin. It was cold, and a thin layer of snow had fallen overnight. The forest was unnervingly quiet. No birds, no distant sounds, just the wind moving through branches. I hadn't gone far before I noticed something off. Marks in the snow, right along the trail. At first, I assumed it was an animal, but as I followed them, it became obvious they weren't. They were shoe prints, clear, deep, fresh. I stopped and looked around. No one should have been out there, especially not that close to our property. The prints continued along the path, and with every step I took, my unease grew. I told myself it was probably a hunter, or maybe someone else owned land nearby. Still, I decided to turn back. I didn't want to cross paths with anyone out there. When the cabin came into view, my stomach dropped. There were footprints leading straight up to the front door. They hadn't been there when I left, which meant someone had been standing right outside the cabin while I was gone. I scanned the trees, my pulse racing, but the forest was empty. After a few seconds, I rushed inside and locked the door behind me. The odds of this happening, on the one day I was there alone, felt impossibly low. And then it hit me. I hadn't locked the cabin when I went for my walk. Why would I? It was my family's property, miles from anywhere. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe whoever it was had followed the trail, seen the cabin, checked if it was abandoned, and left. Still, I called my parents and told them what happened. My mom immediately suggested I stay somewhere else for the night and wait for them to arrive the next day. I didn't listen. I decided to stay, just more carefully. I kept the doors locked and stayed inside all day. Looking back, that was a mistake. The hours crawled by. I sat by the fireplace, drinking coffee to stay awake. Even when exhaustion set in, I refused to sleep. Closing my eyes didn't feel safe. As night fell, the woods outside grew eerily still. The only light came from the fire crackling in front of me. I kept replaying the footprints in my head, wondering how long whoever made them had been there. At some point, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I never checked where the footprints went after reaching the door. I opened the front door just enough to look outside. The night was pitch black. The forest felt oppressive. The shoe prints were still there. I followed them with my eyes, looking for signs they turned back toward the trail. They didn't. The prints ended at the doorway. That's when the realization hit me. Someone had entered the cabin and never left. I slowly turned back toward the flickering orange glow of the fireplace. I wasn't alone. Almost immediately, I heard a creak down the hallway. I leaned forward and looked toward the bedrooms. My bedroom door was open. A man stood in the hallway, moving slowly toward the living room. The moment he saw me, he froze, then rushed toward me. I grabbed my keys from the wall and ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away. By the time I dared to look in the mirror, the cabin had vanished into complete darkness. Police checked the place later. They didn't find the man, but they did find scuff marks on the floor inside the bedroom closet. They believe he'd been hiding there all day, waiting for me to go to sleep. And that's the part I can't stop thinking about. We don't know who he was. We don't know what he planned to do. And I still wonder if it was someone who knew I'd be there alone. Story 3. Running out of gas was the smallest problem I had that night. What still haunts me is what was already waiting out there in the forest, long before my car ever stopped. I was driving through northern Oregon when it happened. I don't remember the exact road, just one of those long, empty back roads that cut straight through miles of dense forest. No towns, no lights, no traffic. I'd been on the road for hours, music low, windows cracked open to stay alert. The whole trip was supposed to be quiet and uneventful, just driving, thinking, clearing my head. I kept an eye on my fuel gauge, planning to stop once it got low, but I misjudged it. When the warning light came on, I checked my phone. The nearest gas station was still a ways out. Not ideal, but I figured I could make it. There were no other options anyway. No side roads, no turnarounds that led anywhere useful. I kept driving. At some point, I noticed something odd. The navigation app wasn't updating anymore. The distance wasn't changing. The little car icon looked frozen in place. Before I could fix it, the engine sputtered. Once, then again. And then, the car died completely. I barely made it onto the shoulder before everything went silent. I sat there for a moment, staring ahead, trying to process where I was. Forest on both sides, thick fog hanging over the treetops, no lights, no sound. I tried calling for help, no service. That explained the GPS. I stepped out of the car, hoping the station might still be close. If the navigation had frozen earlier, maybe I was only a short walk away. Standing there felt worse than moving, so I grabbed a flashlight, locked the car, and started walking. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me. The fog swallowed most of the light from my flashlight. The forest beside me felt wrong, not quiet in a peaceful way, but silent in a way that felt deliberate. Every shadow between the trees looked like something else. I forced myself not to stare too long. After a few minutes, I heard it. Branches snapping, not wind, not animals moving casually. Footsteps. I stopped and pointed my light toward the trees. Nothing visible, just darkness and fog. The longer I stared, the more uneasy I felt, like looking too long would invite something to look back. I kept walking, faster now. That's when I saw it. An old sedan, partially hidden off the side of the road, shoved deep into the tree line. It didn't look like it had crashed. It looked placed, like someone had intentionally pushed it out of sight. The driver's door was slightly open. The car looked like it had been there for a long time. Seeing it made my stomach twist. Whatever happened to whoever owned that car clearly wasn't good. I didn't call out, I didn't investigate, and then I heard movement again, this time closer. I turned just enough to see shapes shifting between the trees. More than one. Figures moving together, keeping pace with me from inside the forest. My blood ran cold. I didn't run. Something instinctive told me not to. Instead, I walked faster, pretending I didn't hear the footsteps matching mine along the tree line. I refused to shine my flashlight toward them, terrified of what I might see, and that's when a truck pulled up beside me. I hadn't even heard it approach. A pickup slowed down, and a man leaned out of the window. He looked older, tired, but normal. He asked if I was stranded. I told him the truth. My car died, and I was trying to reach a gas station. He shook his head and told me I was way farther than I thought. Then he told me to get in. As soon as I did, the forest went silent again. No more footsteps, no movement. The man drove me to the station, explaining he lived nearby and took that road often. He said he'd never seen someone walking out there at night and knew something was wrong. The ride took much longer than I expected. Walking it would have taken hours. At the station, he wished me luck and left. No strange behavior, no questions. I bought gas and called the police like the clerk suggested. A deputy offered to drive me back to my car. When we got there, my car wasn't where I'd left it. It had been pushed off the shoulder, toward the forest. Almost exactly like the abandoned car I'd seen earlier. That's when I told the officer everything. I don't know who those people were. I don't know what would have happened if that truck hadn't stopped. But I know one thing for sure. Running out of gas wasn't the reason I almost didn't make it out of those woods. Story 4. There's a specific kind of fear that only comes when you realize someone has been inside your home. Not to steal, not to break anything, but to wait. I live alone in a small rental house on the edge of a quiet town. Nothing special about it. 1 floor, 2 bedrooms, a small backyard that backs up to a stretch of woods I've never bothered exploring. I moved there for peace. For the first few months, that's exactly what I got. Then small things started happening. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A cabinet door left open when I was sure I'd closed it. The back door unlocked once when I came home from work. I blamed myself. Stress does that to you. I started double-checking everything. One night, I noticed muddy footprints near the back entrance. Just a few. They didn't go far inside. I assumed someone had stepped onto the porch and left. Still, I cleaned them. A week later, they were back. This time, closer to the kitchen. That was the first night I slept with my bedroom door locked. I installed a cheap indoor camera the next day. Nothing fancy, just something to ease my mind. It faced the back door in the hallway. For days, nothing happened. Then, one morning before work, I checked the footage out of habit. There was movement at around 2 a.m. The camera showed my kitchen, dimly lit by the stove clock. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then the timestamp advanced, and a figure stepped into view. A man. He moved slowly, like he wasn't in a hurry, like he knew he had time. He walked barefoot across my kitchen floor, leaving faint dark marks behind. He stopped near the hallway and stood there for nearly 6 minutes, not moving, just listening. I watched the footage in disbelief, waiting to see him leave. He didn't. The video cut off when the camera battery died. I didn't go to work that day. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend, telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe the camera glitched. Maybe someone had broken in and left before I woke up. But the fear didn't fade. I came back 2 nights later, armed with locks, extra lights, and paranoia. I checked every room before going to bed. Closets, under the bed, the attic access, nothing. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Breathing. Not mine. It was faint, uneven, coming from somewhere close. I stayed still, barely daring to breathe myself. The sound stopped. Minutes passed, then my bedroom door handle moved, slowly, just enough to test it. It didn't open. I heard a soft exhale on the other side, like disappointment. I stayed frozen until sunrise. When daylight finally filled the room, I grabbed my phone and called the police. They searched the house. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No man. They told me the footage must have been old or corrupted. I knew it wasn't. That night I stayed awake. Every light on. Knife on the bedside table. Phone fully charged. At exactly 2:47 a.m., my phone vibrated. A text message. "You lock the door now." I stared at it, heart pounding. Another message followed. "You didn't last time." My blood ran cold. Then the power went out. The house fell into complete darkness. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Bare, slow, deliberate. They stopped right outside my room. This time, the handle didn't move. Instead, something scratched gently at the door. Once, twice. Then a whisper. "I waited longer tonight," I screamed. The sound of glass shattering came from the back of the house. I ran, straight through the front door and into the street, barefoot and shaking. The police found him hiding in the crawl space beneath my home. He'd been living there for weeks, watching, waiting, learning my routine. They said he told them he wasn't going to hurt me. He just wanted to see how long I'd notice. I moved out the next day, but sometimes, late at night, I still wake up convinced someone is standing just outside my door, listening. Story 5. There's a huge difference between being alone and realizing someone knows exactly when you are. I work night shifts. That alone already messes with your sense of safety. You sleep during the day, move through the world while everyone else is awake, and come home when the streets are empty and quiet. For years, nothing ever happened. Until one night when I noticed my porch light was on. I never leave it on, ever. It attracts bugs, and more importantly, it makes it obvious when I'm not home. I'm careful about things like that. I stood across the street, staring at my house, keys in my hand, trying to convince myself I'd just forgotten. But the light wasn't the only thing. The front door wasn't fully closed. It wasn't open either, just slightly ajar, like someone had pulled it shut, but not enough for the latch to catch. I didn't go inside. I walked back to my car, locked the doors, and sat there watching the house for nearly 10 minutes. Nothing moved, no shadows in the windows, no sound. Eventually, I told myself I was being paranoid. Inside, everything looked normal. No missing items, no mess, no obvious signs of someone being there. Still, I checked every room before going to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. "You forgot to lock it again." My heart dropped. I replied immediately, asking who it was. No response. I took the day off work and changed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, even the shed out back. For a while, that seemed to solve it. Until a week later. I came home and found my bedroom window unlocked. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked. I know I lock it every day. I live on the ground floor. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. Every creak made my stomach tighten. At 4:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Another message. "You lock things when you're scared." I called the police. They came, took notes, asked questions. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No cameras in the area that caught anything useful. They suggested it might be someone messing with me. I didn't feel messed with. I felt studied. A few days later, I installed cameras. Front yard, backyard, hallway, living room. The first 2 nights, nothing happened. On the third night, the camera in my living room picked up movement at 3:06 a.m. I watched the footage the next morning. At first, the room was empty. Then, the front door opened. Slowly. A man stepped inside. He didn't rush, didn't look nervous. He walked straight to the hallway camera and tilted it upward, directly at the ceiling. Then he turned and left. I never saw his face. That same morning, I found another message. "Cameras are rude." I didn't go back to the house. I stayed with a friend and sent the footage to the police. This time, they took it seriously. They checked the house again. That's when they found the crawl space. A small access panel in the back of a closet I'd never used. It led underneath the house. Inside, they found a sleeping bag, empty food containers, and a notebook. The notebook was filled with dates, times, notes about when I left for work, when I came home, how long I stayed in each room. One page just said, "Doesn't scream." They never found him. The officer told me something I still think about. He said people like that don't break in. They move in quietly. I sold the house. I live somewhere else now, somewhere louder, somewhere crowded. But sometimes, when I get home late at night, I still check the porch light, just to make sure it's off.